Welcome to section 3.2. At the end of section 3.1 you were supposed to go do an exercise on page 96, problem 18, which is the case on page 96, problem 6. You were supposed to come up with at least 2 performance measures. I have some examples here on the slide that would be performance measures to see how the company did. Number of orders received per hour or number of malfunctions per month. If you have similar performance measures that actually have a unit attached to them like this, you did it right. If you gave me a specification or a goal, you didn't do it right. I want to talk more about measures of performance. In this class we're going to use different terminology for measures of performance. We're going to call them critical to quality characteristics, or CTQs. Here's a few other definitions that you need to know for the remainder of this class. The voice of the customer. Voice of the customer is important because we're trying to understand what the customer wants. Actually, the customer, their wants and desires and needs are expressed in what we call the voice of the customer, or the VOC. It's typically sentences where the customer expresses what they want in their own terms. Now the CTQs, or the critical to quality characteristics, to get those we're taking the voice of the customer and translate that into something measurable, some measurable physical or operational characteristics. And our process control item, or a PCI, those are the things we have control over. Typically the process control items are items that affect the CTQs. Now remember, the CTQs are things that the customer cares about. The process control items are not necessarily things the customer cares about. We care, for example, as a process engineer, care about process control items because they will influence our CTQs. So, to help meet and exceed customer expectations, we must fully understand the voice of the customer. The customer may say, I want to get a loan quickly and without hassle. That is a customer requirement expressed in the customer's own terms. Now we have to translate that voice of the customer, I want to get a loan quickly and without hassle, into something measurable, so we can keep track of it and make sure we give the customer what we want. So we want a measurable entity where we can record data. So here we have the voice of the customer, I want to get a loan quickly and without hassle. Let's talk about what the CTQ would look like to make sure that's the case. So we have to translate the voice of the customer into a physical or operational entity. Here we have the customer, I want to get a loan quickly. So what we could do is, let's keep track of how much time passes between filling out an application and loan approval. So the CTQ would be time between filling out an application and loan approval. And my units could be hours. So the CTQ is the voice of the customer translated into a measurable or physical or operational entity. Here's some examples. Let's say the voice of the customer is, I want a hot meal quickly. What could be some CTQs? Well, meal temperature. If you keep track of meal temperature, maybe with a little infrared thermometer right before you serve it, you could develop a data collection sheet, record it, and at the end of the week analyze your data and see how often, for example, your temperatures were above a certain goal. Another CTQ could be time between order and delivery of meal. So your goal may be 20 minutes. Once you start recording the data, the time between order and delivery of meal, at the end of the week you can analyze that data and you can see if you reached your goal. Another example. The customer says, I want a box of dog biscuits that has no broken biscuits and has the weight just like it says on the box. What could be some CTQs? Well, you could keep track of percentage of breakage, so it has a unit. And you could keep track of the package weight. You could take a sample of 5 boxes out of, or every hour, weigh them, and open them up and count the number of broken biscuits, and then record the percentage of breakage and the package weight. So again, the voice of the customer is what the customer wants in their own terms, and the CTQs are those measurable key indicators that help us keep track of whether we give the customer what they want. Now, PCIs would be measurable entities that would influence the CTQs. For example, percent breakage on dog biscuits, a PCI, a process control item, could be dryer temperature, because dryer temperature has an effect on the percent breakage. Now, the key learnings for this brief section was: to meet or exceed customers' expectations, we must fully understand the voice of the customer, and the voice of the customer, after the voice of the customer is understood, we try to figure out how we can translate that into measurable characteristics, and those are the CTQs. Now, one model that can be used to think through the voice of the customer and to fully help you understand the voice of the customer is the Kano Model. Kano was developed, or the Kano Model was developed by Noriaki Kano, was a professor at Tokyo Rika University. He's also an international consultant. So let's take a look at the Kano Model. Kano said you shouldn't just blindly trying to fulfill customers' requirements. You've got to make sure you truly understand it. Because if you blindly fulfill customer requirements without a full understanding of what they are, you're probably just going to give them superfluous quality. You may woo the customer in one area and disappoint them in another. And you may just focus on what they say and not what they really want and think. So the Kano Model focuses on things that the customer tells you they want, and also on others. Kano said there are 3 types of customer requirements. There's basic requirements or dissatisfiers, revealed requirements or satisfiers, and delighters or exciting requirements. The basic requirements or dissatisfiers are essential to customer satisfaction. If a customer doesn't get those, they're going to be extremely displeased. That's why they're called dissatisfiers. If a customer gets those, they're not even going to notice. They're so basic, customers don't even bother spelling them out. Let me give you an example. Let's say you go to Olive Garden to take your family out to supper. You get there, you get seated, you unwrap your silverware, and it's clean. Are you even going to stop and think about that? Are you going to say, "Oh, look, they have really clean silverware here at Olive Garden"? No, you're not. You're just going to unwrap your silverware, you're not going to give it a second thought, and you continue with your conversation. Now imagine you unwrap that silverware and there's a big, giant piece of gunk stuck on the fork. And maybe your spouse unwraps theirs and your spouse's silverware is equally dirty. You're going to notice that? Yes, you are. You're going to probably talk about it and tell all your friends. Can you imagine I went to Olive Garden and all the silverware was really nasty? So that's an example of a basic requirement or dissatisfier. It's so basic, you don't even notice if you get it. But if you don't get it, by golly, you're going to be disappointed and mad, dissatisfied. So we have to, as an organization, try to figure out what our customers' basic requirements are, because we have to get those right. If we don't get those right, customers are really dissatisfied. The next type of requirement is the revealed requirements or satisfiers. Those are pretty straightforward. Those are typically spelled out by the customer. Those are usually the specifications that the customers give us. Could be blueprint tolerances, for example. If we get them right, the customer is satisfied. If we get them wrong, they're dissatisfied. And the third type of customer requirements are the delighters, or the exciting requirements. Those are unexpected favors that if the customer get those, they are really delighted. An example of those is Midwest Airline used to fly out of Kansas City to Boston. And we flew them one time when my daughter was little. And we got on the airplane, took our seat. Right after takeoff, we would smell the delicious smell of cookies. And then once we had reached altitude, the flight attendant would come around with a tray of fresh baked chocolate chip cookies. They were all warm and gooey, and oh, they tasted so good. We were delighted. To this day, when we fly to Boston, my daughter asked, "Can we take that airline where they had those chocolate chip cookies?" So serving chocolate chip cookies was unexpected, and it was a delighter. And yes, it did always sway me to check out their prices, because I wanted to fly that airline again to get those chocolate chip cookies. So the Kano model is all about thinking through customer requirements. There's the basic requirements, the revealed requirements, and the delighters, and you have to have a true understanding of what they are. And then you should also make sure you measure what those are. You keep track of data associated with them. You use the Kano model to understand your customers. You use the Kano model to try to find opportunities to delight your customers. You make sure that expected requirements don't fall through the cracks and that you keep track of. And you can use the Kano model to develop CTQs, critical to quality characteristics. Typically you use the Kano model during the Six Sigma project selection, or right when you get started with the project work, to get everybody on the team to think about customer requirements. You may use the Kano model during new product development or new service development, or if you think about on how to determine market strategy, there's lots of uses for the Kano model. Let's do an exercise where you apply the Kano model to the dining services at the university that you're attending. For example, Sodexo at Missouri Southern. I want you to think about it. I want you to list some basic requirements, some revealed requirements, and some exciting requirements. And then in the next section, in section 3.3, we'll give you some examples of that.